partnership, and the remaining $20 million is anticipated will be utilized in terms of certain requirements and preparedness in terms of civil aviation, in terms of certain upgrades to the airport, and also it is expected that it will assist in terms of LEAT. Mr. President. We all would agree that tourism has been vitally important to Barbados, probably over 60 years at this point in time. And over time, we have developed what has been called the Barbados brand. In recent years, we have had issues in terms of the number of tourists, visitors who come to Barbados, and especially so after 2008 for various reasons. We were having, I think recently I saw information where it was showing that in terms of the visitor spend in Barbados, we were still hovering at around 2007, 2008 levels, although we could show marginal improvements in terms of the percentage of visitors, both cruise ship and long stay, coming to Barbados. Having said that, over the years, recognizing the importance of tourism, our ports, seaports, and airports have been expanded, have been upgraded, and it is almost a continuous process. Regrettably, in recent years, because of the financial woes and the issues, the Grantley Adams Airport, International Airport, formerly Seawell, which went through the whole set of changes I spoke about, has had some issues in terms of the upgrade and repavement of the runway. And it is now 15 years, and I believe it is long overdue in terms of having this restored and upgraded. Of course, for all of these things, funding and finance is necessary. In spite of that, we have done well in terms of international air transport standards, in terms of our satellite facilities and satellite-based navigation. These are all on par. And we have, I believe in 2017, over 2 million persons transited, utilized the Grantley Adams Airport in terms of passengers. So we have held our own in spite of some of these difficulties. Grantley Adams International Airport, we all appreciate, is a hub in terms of travel in the Eastern Caribbean, in terms of intra-regional and in terms of connections for persons coming from the Eastern Caribbean who want to get into Europe, North America, and Canada. Sorry, North America and Europe. With this in mind, and with the competition around the region, countries, we know that Antigua has, in recent years, had a new airport constructed, certainly in St. Vincent. In St. Vincent, there's a new airport, and Antigua, as I said. And in addition, we know that St. Lucia is pushing now for a new airport, and indeed St. Kitts. So there's competition around the region in terms of all of these countries which depended on Barbados as a hub, are now moving to acquire and to construct international aerodromes, airports, to facilitate the movement of tourists, both land-based and also in terms of the cruise passengers. This one. We have to step up to the plate. And obviously we need to look, and have been looking, at major upgrades to our airport. Obviously, in these circumstances, we have to do it in a piecemeal fashion. And we will have to perhaps look primarily at the runway at this point in time. Although I should mention, in terms of the Eastern Caribbean, again, we are at an advantage. We have the longest runway, it's over 11,000 feet, I believe, at this point in time. But not only in terms of repaving it, but we now have to look at widening it to accommodate some of the wide bore aircraft that we have coming and expected to come to Barbados more frequently. So in a nutshell, the issue of this levy is to ease the burden on government, and certainly the taxpayers, and shift it to those who are utilizing the airport. It is not uncommon. It is done throughout the world. Indeed, some of the countries in the Caribbean, I believe St. Lucia has won 100 US, a similar levy. And they have showed an increase in passenger arrivals by over 11% in spite of this introduction of this levy. The plan is, as I said at the beginning, in terms of utilizing the available funds that are expected to be raised by introduction of this new levy. Now, I know that some honorable senators have been querying in terms of the amendments. I want to make it clear that in this situation, there is an amendment to the Cap 6059. That is the act that is being amended at this particular time. By way of history, members will remember that there was a departure tax, about 15, 16 years ago. 15, 16 years ago. And at that time, the Grantley Adams International Airport, the Act of Grantley Adams International Airport Transfer of Management and Vesting of Assets Act 2003 came into force, giving Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc. the ability to charge fees and to raise revenues for the efficient management of the airport. The Airport Service Charge Act, which is being amended today, was made dormant. It was not repealed at that time. It was felt that it would be prudent to simply leave the act in a dormant state to cater for probably future revenue generation in the event that the government of Barbados perhaps was seeking to establish a new airport. So it is now being amended to provide for this levy to be charged. There's a query as to if the current $55 will be just increased to $70. That is not the intention. The $70 for those traveling within CARICOM will be in addition to the $55, and the $140 for those traveling outside extra-regionally will be added to that. So those are in a nutshell, those are the specific changes. I think members should also be aware that currently the collection of these fees, levies, are done for those airlines which are associated with IATA. It's through IATA, and IATA reimburses the Grantley Adams International Airport, of course, after they have garnered their commission. The airlines who are billed by IATA would be Air Canada, American Airlines, British Airways, Caribbean Airlines, Condor, JetBlue, Liat, Thomas Cook, TUI Airways, Virgin Atlantic, WestJet. And then there are a number of smaller airlines and private planes that are billed directly by Grantley Adams International Airport. And this is expected to continue. Mr. President, I think I have captured all the queries perhaps in a nutshell. And I now beg to move that this bill, be read a second time. I'm obliged to you, sir.
It has been moved that the bill under discussion be now read a second time. All those in favor? I recognize Senator Franklin.
Mr. President, initially when I read this legislation, this proposed legislation, I wasn't even going to speak on this thing. But the more I read of it, the more I read it, the more I realize how confusing it is. And, this morning when I spoke about people rushing and doing the wrong thing. Well, this is another example of it. Because this act wasn't made dormant, as the leader said. I think he was mistaken. Huh? I don't know. An act is always enforced as long as it's on the books. You can repeal it, or you can keep it on the books, but it is enforced. But it was never the intention to keep it on the books and not enforce it, because when the airport went over in 2003, this act was amended because you must remember, the collector of the taxes used to be the Treasury. And they changed Treasury to Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc. Right? I used to be one of the people at the airport making people go back to pay. I used to be an immigration officer myself as a matter of fact. I said the first job in public service, his father got it for me. And Senator Adams' father, he sought me out at the airport when they first thing. And I went up there and I did my best because, you know, when you get a job like that, you're supposed to do your best to make sure you don't embarrass the person who sent you. So I made sure that all those taxes were collected. So I know a little bit about this act and these taxes. This act that we are amending now, we shouldn't even be amending it for the purpose that we want. This is a completely new levy, has nothing to do with the airport service charge. You should have now this new levy, some act or something, a new act. Because when you amend this act and you just amend section 3, it is 3.1. You didn't amend 3.2, right? You didn't amend 3.2. 3.2 made for exemptions for people who would not pay. Governor General, member of the House, member of the Senate, their wives, guests of the government, people traveling in government business. You know, but right now this charge that we have is going to be in the ticket. It will be in the ticket, the cost of the ticket. Let's say I want to travel. I want to buy a ticket. I'm a senator now. I still get not used to this yet. I don't want to pay the tax because the law says I'm not supposed to pay. How am I not going to pay this tax? According to the legislation, if I had paid it, this same act, I could go to the accountant general and get back my money. You know, but this act has nothing to do with the accountant general now, you know. So let's say now I pay this money into the airline who is supposed to collect it for the government, they buy a ticket, and they take 2.5% of it, because they're supposed to take 2.5% of the money, and then pay the rest into Grant the National Airport Inc. Now I have to go to the accountant general and say, look, I traveled, I had a ticket, and here's my copy of my ticket, I want back my money. The accountant general will look at me and ask me, you trying to be foolish? Because I ain't getting money from you. So I think this, mind you, I don't want to stop the government from raising revenue or whatever, but you are amending the wrong act. You've dealt with the wrong piece of legislation. It should not be in this legislation at all. This deals with, you know, but immigration officers, I told you earlier, used to tell people, no, sorry, or tell people they're exempted. Right? So, right now, this act has nothing to do with the immigration department or the customs department, any other department. It just has something to do with the airport. The airline is collecting the money, and it is not the airline service charge act that you should be amending. This should be some airport levy charge or whatever you call it act, because then it will come. It will run afoul of the legislation that you're amending. Because right now I don't want back my money, and so too would be how about the people who travel, the defense force people who travel, children under the age of 12, you know, and transit passengers, crew members, and the list goes on. Sir, we have identified the wrong piece of legislation to amend. That is the problem with this legislation that we have now. I was hopeful that the government would have seen that before they embarrass themselves and bring this, or let it come to the House and the Senate. This piece of legislation, sir, to my mind, is another situation where people make the government sign off on the wrong thing. Like what I'm talking about this morning, the Chief Parliamentary Council was given instructions, because this is how it works. The Chief Parliamentary Council is given government policy, and the government policy says, okay, we're going to start doing A, B, and C. This is what we want to do with it. This is what we want to do with the law. The minister don't draft a law. I don't think the good doctor who leaves the House will draft a law. I might trust him to cut at me and take out the wrong thing or the right thing, depending on the case may be. But I'm not asking him to draft a law. But when he comes here to defend bad work, because that's what they're doing now, you know. You give the ministers the wrong thing to come here to pilot. This might be government policy, but the government won't get the money, and you must not decide, well, you want the money, then we get it. You're going to do it correctly. And we are not doing it correctly, sir. We are now attempting to amend the wrong piece of legislation. This is not an amendment to this act. this is a new piece of legislation that should have come in the course of a new act here. I understand the government is supposed to get the money. That's not even my concern right now. I think, like, when it first was announced, I remember seeing on TripAdvisor where the people, one guy from England say, I go to Barbados every year, this is my last trip. You know? Well, I don't know if it's the same people that Senator Walker said that more people come to St. Lucia or wherever has a new tax. But our people, the people that travel into Barbados might be a different kind, because if you check out TripAdvisor, you have people saying they ain't coming back. All I'm saying to you, sir, let this stand down with this piece of legislation right now. Because it does not, look, it is the wrong act, because what they are proposing to do with this legislation does not conform with what's going on here. For instance, if I'm supposed to get it back, I have to go to the Treasury didn't collect it. Right? No money's paid into the Treasury. Now this money is being paid into, I heard IATA and Grand Island National Airport Inc. and all kind of stuff. I don't have any relationship with IATA. I heard with IATA know that Caswell Franklin is not supposed to pay. I book online now. I get fancy. My son teach me how to use the computer. I get fancy. I book online. What do I do not to pay this thing because I'm not entitled to pay? The people from the defense force are not supposed to pay. And transit passengers are not supposed to pay. People traveling with aircraft that are less than 6,000 pounds are not supposed to pay. All of these people are not supposed to pay. But you are buying it in your ticket already. Who is this? How will the people who are receiving this money know that I am exempt, know that the defense force is exempt, know that all these other people are exempt, know that the government general is exempt? You need a way to work around this, and I'm not seeing how you will do it with this piece of legislation. I'm not going to sit down and say aye to something I don't understand, and quite frankly, I do not understand it. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I feel that they address the wrong piece of legislation, and as such, you need to go back and say we do the wrong thing and go back and do it right this time. We had some what they call this morning typographical errors, and this is probably another typographical too. But it is the wrong piece of legislation, sir. And I don't intend to belabor the point much more, but it is wrong, it is done improperly. Yeah, you want the money, you know, but you cannot get the money at any way you do it. You just have to do it right. This is not being done correctly. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of Senate. I rise at this time, sir, to add my voice to this service charge, airport service charge amendment. But before that, I wish to preface my comments, Mr. President, as I would have listened very carefully to our tourism minister and his remarks on this bill that was debated in the other house. And I must say that I am greatly appreciative of his comprehensive presentation that would have first took us back to when Grantley Adams was a lad, and Grantley Adams International Airport was a lad, when it would have received its first commercial flights, and how this lad would have grew up and has indeed matured, so much so that indeed we are very pleased for the development of our international airport and of course the tourism product that we have here in Barbados. And I must say that indeed I am pleased that there is a plan to, of course, further develop the Grantley Adams International Airport and, of course, our nation's tourism product. I know that I said further development because despite the serious economic crisis that is facing our nation, which can very much, sir, be blamed on the former administration in its inability to manage well the economic affairs of our nation in light of the worldwide Great Recession. And note that this would have struck at pretty much the beginning of their tenure. I would wish to give credit where, in my humble opinion, credit is due. I know we have criticized the previous administration in a number of areas that they would have failed, but I must take the opportunity to compliment them for the work that was done, particularly within the tourism sector, and how the former tourism minister would have worked hand in hand with the Barbados Tourism Marketing Incorporation and the BTPI for planting some seeds. I like to describe it as planting some seeds that enabled this vital sector to survive even during some very tough times. And I want to particularly refer to some statistics that would have highlighted the fact that over the last 4 years or so, we can say that the tourism or the tourist arrivals have increased, even although, yes, we would argue that it has not increased in tourism spending, but the fact that, indeed, Barbados continues to be a place where we see a continuous increase now in the arrivals, where, according to the Central Bank press release for June 2018, we see that from 2013 up to 2017, there was an increase in terms of tourist arrivals. And it even goes to state here further that even in the first or half of the year so far for 2018, according to the Central Bank press release, that tourist arrivals for the first half of the year increased by an estimated 3.4%. And so that's why I believe that, indeed, we still need to give credit where credit is due. And also as a nation, Mr. President, we can also recall that just last year, I believe it was, that we as a nation would have took the top ranking in terms of the Destination Satisfaction Index, which, as we know, measures the total satisfaction or tourist satisfaction of the product that we are offering here in our island. However, surely this index, I believe, would have started to be an impact upon at the beginning of the year in particular, when, of course, we would have received some bad press, and rightly so, concerning our South Coast sewage situation, where, of course, the US and the UK and Canada, our biggest markets in the industry, would have issued some warnings about, for the people coming here and being concerned about their health condition if they're exposed to the South Coast situation. But thank God, Mr. President, we are seeing some signs of having this sewage problem resolved. And thank God as well, according to the Central Bank release again in June 2018, we see that the tourist arrivals, at least for the first half of the year, have not been affected because of the South Coast sewage situation. Although we don't know if it may have an impact on the latter part of our year, but as I said, hopefully the good news will be sent to the UK and to Canada and indeed to the US that we are solving a problem right now. And so it is safe to come even to stay in hotels and to traverse the restaurants on the South Coast. And so hopefully that good news will also now get out there and enable our tourist arrivals to continue to be on the upward trend. Well, Mr. President, I believe that it is because of this favorable condition of our tourism sector at this time that our government now can be bold enough to venture into having this amendment to this bill, where even in the mini-budget statement, we would have heard the Honourable Prime Minister emphasizing that there is a maturity in the Barbados tourism sector. And again, I believe she can say that because of where we are, even when this new government would have entered after the 24th of May. And so I believe it is because of that favorable condition that our government is now able to bravely say to the nation that it is willing to allow this private-public partnership to be established, and also to now introduce the airline travel and tourism development fee, which is stated here within the mini-budget, and of course what we are seeking now to amend, of there being, for passengers flying outside of the Caribbean, that it will be 70 US, and for those within the CARICOM, it will be 35 US, and that this fee will be added to the departure tax now payable. Now, like Senator Caswell, Mr. President, I was a bit taken back and a bit confused as to what exactly are we supposed to be doing here at this time in the amendment of this airport service charge. Because the two acts that I have, which is the one that is not amended as yet, would indicate that we are amending Section 3 of, one of Section 3, subsection 1 of 3, where it states here that the initial one would state that subject to this act, they shall be paid by the traveler on each occasion that he leaves the airport for a place outside Barbados, a charge of $25 to be known as the airport service charge. And from my recollection, in terms of, I know I'm not that old, even although I have the grays, but I believe it is the time when Senator Jerome was mentioning about the fact that about 15 to 20 years ago, when this same $25 would have been referred to as the departure tax. And since that time, more recently then, it would have been changed to $55 as the departure tax. Now I'm being told that there's a difference, or that there's a distinction between what is the airport service charge and now what is also today now referred to as the departure tax, because we're hearing now that this act was laid dormant, and again that needs to be explained further, but now we are seeking to amend this dormant act to adjust what is called now the airport service charge. But I was really hoping that my interpretation of what was supposed to be happening was that the 70 Barbados and the 140 Barbados that is now supposed to amend this section was that the 70 was going to be the departure tax and the 140, but I'm being corrected that that's not so, that this 70 and 140 is to be added to the current $55 that is currently charged, and of course it doesn't necessarily appear, or you can't see it because it's included within the ticket. And so I'm concerned now with the fact that it is now raised to such a high level that I am very cautious of supporting this particular amendment, sir. Reason being is that we are now asking what I would consider a ridiculous fee of paying 125 Barbados dollars, which 62.5 or 62.50 US, for one who is traveling within the Caribbean region, and we are charging 195 Barbados, 97.50 US, for those who are traveling outside of the region, leaving our shores. And this, for me, will negatively impact upon what we have already started to build in terms of our tourism industry. That is my concern, and so I share, like some of the others that have the concern that this rise will affect the frequent flyers, it would affect the business travelers, it would affect those who are coming here for holiday with a big family. And so I believe it will have indeed a negative or significant impact, maybe a very significant fall off in the numbers of those who come and then depart from our shores. The other concern, Mr. President, I also have is the fact that there is now this also a bold approach in seeking now to have a distinction between the different rates. Those who are flying in the region will pay $70. Those who are flying outside of the region will be called to pay the $140. I don't know if discrimination is the right word to be used, but it is as if it is suggesting that those who are traveling further than the Caribbean should either have a lot more money to spend, or they are receiving a better service when they travel further afield than those who are traveling within the Caribbean, because they're being charged more than those who are traveling within the region. And then when we look at other Caribbean islands, the other Caribbean islands will have one fixed rate across the board. And so it is a very bold move by our government to be able to suggest that those who are traveling in the region will pay $70 and those outside of the region will have to pay $140. And so again, I believe that this will have a negative impact when our tourists are comparing and analyzing what is happening in the other Caribbean islands. We just heard from the leader of business that St. Vincent has now an international airport, and there are others who are moving towards that. And when I look at the rates that are charged by some of these other international airports, in St. Lucia I am seeing 13 US for departure tax. For Jamaica I am seeing 35 US for departure tax. For Trinidad and Tobago I am seeing 14.75 US. I'm not sure, of course, I didn't research St. Vincent, but now they have an international airport, I'm sure they may very well up theirs as well. But here it is, we are suggesting that all rates, if we add the 70 to the 55, we are now asking those within the region, if you're traveling within the region, to pay 62.5 or $62.50 US. And those who are traveling outside of the region, Mr. President, we are asking them to pay $97.50 US. The only other island that I saw that is fairly close to what we are recommending is Antigua. For my research, Antigua is charging for the departure tax $75 US. Now, that 75 US, however, is across the board. So there's no way that they will be charging their tourists who are traveling back to Canada or back to England or back to Canada from Antigua, will they be charging more than 75 US? But we are going to be charging them $97.50 US in total for them to leave our shores. And so I believe that indeed this will have a negative impact. And I'm a bit concerned, as I said, with the distinction that is being made here when all the other Caribbean islands are doing one flat rate and we are distinguishing between the two, those who are within the region and those who are traveling abroad. I guess we will say, well, those who are traveling in the region, they're traveling on small planes, mostly, maybe Liat. And we are thinking that maybe, okay, the other ones are traveling on bigger planes, so they should be paying more to travel on the bigger plane that's coming into our island and so forth. But I'm fearful that such a raise will indeed impact upon our tourist industry. I want to suggest, Mr. President, that if we wish to consider a raise, and I'm not saying that we should not have a raise. I do support the fact that we need a raise because I'm very intrigued again by the government's plans of developing or further developing the Grantley Adams International Airport. I am looking forward to the whole thing of having, of course, for those disabled, that was mentioned by the tourism minister, of making it more disabled friendly, of having greater and more beautiful lounge and so forth. In other words, he emphasized the fact that the money, people will get service for the money. And so yes, I'm applauding that, and I do agree that we need to have a hike in the departure tax. But I'm concerned about the rate that we are raising this departure tax, because I believe it will have a negative impact upon our tourism product, upon our tourism statistics. But I would suggest, however, that if there is any raise in the departure tax, I would humbly suggest maybe it is better to go within the region of 50 US. And again, I would suggest, if it is not across the board, that the most that we should be asking those who are traveling extra-regional will be the 50 US, and then we can stick with the 35 US or so for the interregional. The last comment I will wish to raise at this point, Mr. President, deals with the number 5 of the original act, because I realize that nothing was amended besides the word travel, I believe. Yes, the only thing that it was suggested here of being an amendment was that you delete the word travelers and substitute with the word persons. But if again we are going to be raising the departure tax, well, okay, if we're going to be, again, I'm getting confused because, again, it is a distinction between the departure tax and the airport service charge. But if we're going to be raising the airport service charge, here, sir, from 25, we are saying to 70 for regional and to 140 for extra-regional, then I would suggest, sir, that there would also have to be some level of amendment to the charges that are issued there for the offenses. Because I'm assuming that these offenses, the charge that was there, for example, would have been there, of course, to hinder persons from trying to evade such an airport service charge. And so we see in Section 5, we have that if one seeks to evade the payment, then he should be liable of a fine of $150. Now again, if you're talking about a tourist who is going back to Canada or going back to UK, and they are supposed to pay $140 if we agree on that this evening, then just paying an extra $10, they will try to evade, I believe, because it is not much more, just $10 more if they're caught. And so I believe, really and truly, again, there should be some level of reflecting on these, where if you're going to be changing one area of the bill, there are others that come along already. It was raised about the fact of the fact that the Governor General and the wives and husbands and children and so forth of the senators and so forth don't have to pay the airport service charge. But here again, we are omitting the fact that we need to look at the entire bill and put things together so that it reflects whatever change we are seeking to make, that the entire bill reflects such. And so I believe, sir, that indeed, as I recommended, I believe that we are raising the airport service charge. If it is to be added to the current departure tax, we are raising it too high, sir. And as I submit, I believe that the total departure tax, which would include whatever adjustment we make to this particular act to raise it, should be no more than 50 US. That's my humble submission, sir. I'm obliged to you.
Senator Maxwell, and may I respectfully suggest that hereafter we refer to all senators by their surname for consistency, and not by Christian names sometimes and surnames sometimes. I think we should be consistent and always refer to senators by their surname. I next recognize Senator Springer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to support this bill, the Airport Service Charge Amendment bill, because to my mind, this is not just another imposition of taxes, of a tax on the good people of Barbados, but rather this bill represents an attempt by this government to get the Grantley Adams International Airport back on a solid footing so that it can maintain its competitive edge in the region in the face of a rapidly changing environment. Mr. President, airports as we know them today are not just places where you go to catch a plane. Today, airports can be considered or can be seen as drivers, in many cases, drivers of an economy. I'm going to explain how that works. There have been a number of studies carried out that show that there's a direct link between the amount of persons going through the airport or traveling from place to place and the economic development of that particular region. Basically what it says is that the more persons travel, the more likely for you to see some form of economic development in the region. And there's a reason for that. In the past, one would think that growth within a country's economy was based on the movement of goods, cargo, and services to some extent. But what we have found is that the movement of people, the movement of ideas, people's ability to move from one part of the world to another part of the world in a timely fashion has contributed heavily to the economic growth in a number of regions. And this region in particular this country in particular has benefited directly from that kind of movement. And we would not want to see a situation where that movement is stymied because of a dilapidated plant or a hotel that is in dire shape or disappear. We don't want to do anything that will slow down the movement of people throughout the region. We have seen the benefit. We have seen the benefit from a tourism perspective. We have seen the benefits of having some of the brightest minds pass through our country, come into our country, and exporting of those minds from this country to other parts of the region, which in turn abundant to the development of those other territories. What we have noticed over the last couple of years, last few decades, that a number of countries throughout the world, I'm talking about international imports now, have positioned themselves or have recognized that they are strategic in terms of their location, and they have positioned themselves to become aviation hubs in their particular region. I can think of airports like Dubai International, which, from what I've read, in the space of 1 year could move something like 70 million persons pass through the Dubai airport. And in many cases, those persons are not going to Dubai. Dubai is seen like as a link between Asia and Europe, between Asia and Africa, and in some cases between Africa and Asia. And Dubai is that link. So that country, Dubai, has positioned it, the United Arab Emirates has positioned itself in a way that it will benefit from the movement of people throughout Asia, Europe, and Africa. And you can imagine with 70 million or so persons passing through your airport, the type of revenue that would accrue, that country would be bringing in from that type of airlift, that type of movement. Even close to home, we have in Panama, I just want to get the right name, Tocumen Airport in Panama, which has established itself also as a hub for international transport for aviation within Central America and the Caribbean. Despite all the other airports that are in that area in Jamaica and other Central American countries and South American countries, Tocumen Airport in Panama has somehow gotten ahead of the others and established itself as a hub. And you can see flights coming in from all over Europe, all over the Caribbean for sure. We just recently had a flight out of Barbados, a direct flight straight to Panama. I think it goes on to Brazil, or it comes from Brazil into Panama and on to Barbados, and then goes up to New York or something like that. But the point I'm trying to make is that it is now a hub for the entire Caribbean, for the entire region, sorry, because it has connections from North America, South America, and here in the region. And that's what Barbados, I believe, the minister responsible for international transport, it was alluded to here in this honorable chamber, and it was alluded to in the other place. That is the direction that Barbados needs to be going in. And we do not want to see a situation where the other international airports in the region, and there are a few now, because we lack the necessary funds to upgrade, as Senator Maxwell alluded to upgrade our facilities here, to upgrade our airport, that we lack the necessary funds that another airport in the region, maybe a newer one, like Argyle down there in St. Vincent, steps up and over time becomes that aviation hub in this region. It can happen. Believe me, it can happen. I remember a conversation almost 10 years ago, and that airport was not even near complete. 10 years ago, I was at the university at the time, and a young Vincentian student was explaining to me that they can't wait for the day where the airport is completed, and they won't have to, pass through Barbados. Right? And there were other students there who were, and the point was made that when that airport was completed, that persons would then be able to, other persons from other islands, Grenada, St. Lucia, will be able then to use that airport in St. Vincent, and those persons in turn will not have to pass through Barbados. And we know that sentiment is out there. So we don't want a situation right where another airport, out of the fog, out of the blues, steps up and position themselves in a way that they become the hub, the aviation hub in Barbados. In the region, sorry. Thank you very much, Senator Cummings. Of course, in order to maintain this competitive edge, the airport is going to need resources. It's going to need money. How are we going to get that money? We're going to have to acquire that money through taxes. Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend that I enjoy paying taxes, because I don't. Just like many other Barbadians don't prefer to pay taxes. But we know, and I know, I'm sure everyone in this honorable chamber knows, that if we want a situation where the amenities and the facilities at the airport are upgraded to international standards, then we know we need we need a large amount of money. I, for one, would like a situation where you can walk off the plane straight through, we call them a jet bridge, air bridge, gangway, straight into the terminal. I would like that. I would love to do that. I've been a victim of having gotten off a plane and then being caught in the rain. I've experienced that. It's not nice. We don't want a situation where persons are complaining from the time they step off the plane in Barbados, they are complaining about the facilities. And we know that they do. Persons who are accustomed to traveling internationally would be familiar with the air bridge. We don't have that, but I know that we will someday be looking to go in that direction. But in order to go in that direction, we're going to need resources, we're going to need funding to pay for that. It's not cheap. I don't imagine it was cheap. If it was cheap, we would have had it a long time ago. I know some time ago there was an argument that tourists like to get off the plane and feel the breeze in their face and look around and walk on the ground. I don't know if that's still true. Not in 2018. If it were true in the 90s or in the 80s, I don't believe it's true now. I believe that a person like to walk straight off the plane, straight into the terminal, straight through immigration and be processed. I think that's what the modern day traveler prefers. And we would want that. We would like to see the day when the Grantley Adams Airport has that particular facility. I've noticed that we have recently installed those self-service machines. That's a good step, the use of technology. Anything that would facilitate a quick turnaround of persons in the airport is welcome. Any type of technology is welcome. But if there's one thing about technology that we all know and we all can appreciate, is that technology is expensive. There's a cost connected to technology. And the question I asked before, how are we going to find the resources to acquire this technology? Through the imposition of taxes. That's perhaps the only way I can imagine, based on the conversation that we would have had here, the only way I can imagine we can acquire the funds. I'm sure that we would want to see the build-out of some of the facilities at the airport. See more shops, more restaurants, more cafes, the things that you see when you travel internationally. Now, I've been to 1 or 2 airports here in the region. I've been to 1 or 2 airports internationally. And what I've seen in some airports when I travel fascinates me. I've been to an airport here, and this was 10 years ago, that resemble a small city when you go into the terminal. We like to see that here. We would enjoy seeing something like that here in Barbados, but we know it will come with a cost. We will want to see improvements to some of the facilities there. I know that Senator Maxwell mentioned improved facilities for persons from the disabled community. They are travelers too. And I am pretty certain that the minister responsible also mentioned it, that this is one of the areas that we're heading in that direction where we would facilitate persons with disabilities. But again, this will come at a cost. And also, I inquired about it earlier. I was told that there's a facility for persons seeking religious reflection. I've never visited it, I've never seen it, but I imagine it is there. And if it is not there, or if it's there, I am sure that that too can do with some improvements. Persons who are more intimately involved in the airport than I am can tell you that the plant is under stress. I will not go as far as to say that it's falling apart, but I can tell you it's under stress. We know that the runway is in the evening of its days, is approaching its lifespan, and is in, I don't want to say dire need, but it's in need of some repair. We're going to need funding for that. It's in need for expansion. We're going to need funding for that as well. And we know that I can speak to the parts of the airport that I've been, but what I can tell you is that the airport really needs a facelift. It does. It needs some sprucing up. As I said, I've been to other airports in the region, not been to a lot, but I can tell you that ours is in need of a spruce up. Desperately, for a country that boasts the type of tourist arrivals that we normally boast, we can do with a little sprucing up at our airports. And I understand and appreciate why there was a need for the cost for these improvements, for these upgrades to be spread across the board, so persons who can well afford to pay will pay a little bit more towards the cost. Of course, persons would think that everyone should pay the same amount, but I beg to differ. I believe, like everything else in this country, if you can afford to pay a little bit more, you should pay a little bit more. Hence the variation in cost. So as I wrap up, because I don't want to be too long, and I just want to reinforce the point that I made earlier. I'm not pleased about paying taxes, but just like any other right-thinking Barbadian, I'm sure that if I can see where my tax dollar is going, if I can feel as though I'm getting value for money, if I feel as though I'm seeing the improvements that I'm contributing towards the enhancement, the improvement of my country, I believe that most Barbadians, myself included, will be willing to pay a little bit more to see that our airport remains competitive, to see that our airport is improved. And with those few words, I just want to reiterate my full support for this bill. Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Senator Springer, and I now call upon Senator Boyce to make his contribution.
Thank you, Mr. President. What is becoming a trend, I seem to be following after Senator Springer, and I rise somewhat reluctantly on this occasion because we independent senators are very aware that for matters like this, our voices sound so softly. And we just seek to add how we can to the debate and to hopefully offer some opportunity for consideration of alternatives, while in no way attempting to seek to impede, because it's a reality that you can't, the government's strategy or aim this evening. The first consideration I would, however, recommend from a very objective standpoint would be that there was a period of considerable lobbying when the issue of taxes was being raised in the UK, and I believe Senator Grant and other persons involved in the Caribbean tourism economy would have expressed their concern over the impact of taxes and travel. Now, the analysis, I would certainly defer to Senator Drake's or Senator Springer in terms of their skill set, but the studies seem to realize that once you have taxation, there's going to be a resultant impact. That being said, it's totally within the government's right to determine its policy and to apply taxes as it sees fit. In the circumstances, I rise simply to offer 3 suggestions going forward in terms of the application of this new increased tax to hopefully provide some assistance to the government, as well as the people in Barbados and our tourist guests, and we call them our family, during the course of this proposed tax increase. Firstly, I would suggest that we clarify the purpose of the tax, in that we don't expect others to care about our economic problems. That's a fact. Actually, there are some Barbadians who don't care unless they are impacted. So if there is any way, and of course, Senator Moore and those who deal with the communication industry would certainly be masters at that, how do we explain or how do we convey the purposes? What do we intend to achieve by this tax? And does that provide any benefit to a person who has to pay it? Can an ad campaign be considered in conjunction with the increase so that we let them understand that we value what they offer to our country, but we do need their assistance in these circumstances? The second point is, could there be any consideration for a removal of the tax, or that the tax not be charged on children? When you consider families of a certain size, could that be something which is considered when you're looking at huge families? I see there's children under 12 years. So for families who are traveling for vacations, is this something that should be given thought when the analysis is done as to the volume of persons who are coming, the age group of family members, and whether there are certain, maybe the elderly, if persons are coming for vacations to have time in the sun, that we give some consideration to removing it for certain aspects. I have also been informed by those in the travel industry that should we even have the tax perhaps prorated in terms of looking at it being applied in association with the landing charges on the airplanes. All these are concepts for the government to consider as it goes forward in the implementation, but in no means are we getting up here saying, don't do it. Thirdly, I would like to suggest that there's some incentive given to persons who have to pay the tax. No one here likes to have to pay something for nothing. It goes against the whole nature of mankind. Is there an incentive that can be offered to tourists who now have to pay this increased tax in the form of coupons for restaurants who will tie in and recognize the gains? Can the BHTA be involved in some form of program in which persons who have had to pay this impacted and increased tax suddenly be given a discount to attend restaurants or other Barbadian attractions. Therefore, by not only saying we have charged you more, we are also saying we recognize this will impact you, and we are saying here is a little something for your pain. So those are the three small suggestions I would like to put forward in terms of the implementation and to be considered by the government and the necessary technocrats who assist. But a final word of warning, and I would urge Senator Walcott, as well as the other members of the cabinet, you must monitor this tax well and ensure that the relevant officers who are tracking the income do the necessary tracking as well, not only of the income derived from the tax, but any resulting decrease in terms of visitors. And I know Senator Grant will be very cognizant of the potential impact, because the concern remains that if we see this tax resulting or trending downwards in terms of arrivals, that we may find ourselves in a position where the tourism golden egg is impacted. Further, in 2020, the government has indicated that there will be an increase in VAT for the hotel sector. If there is a downward trend in the tourist arrivals, in addition to the increased VAT levy, I would urge that the government take the necessary steps to monitor the implementation of the tax in line with the resultant arrivals so as to avoid any double whammy on our tourism industry by having to pay the increased VAT as well as the potential impact, if any, of reduced stays as a result of the legislation. With those few comments, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Boyce. I now call on Senator McConney to make her contribution.
Thank you, Mr. President. In rising to support the amendment to the airport service charge, I recognize that in the Caribbean and across the world, countries are, for the most part, using travel-related taxes and duties and charges and fees and levies to be able to find the resources they need to invest in their infrastructure, their tourism products, the experiences in their countries, and a number of other areas that will contribute to their development and their growth and their income earning. And my support for the service charge, the airport service charge, hinges on two questions. Is this airport service charge necessary now for Barbados? And is this airport service charge reasonable relative to other neighbors and internationally? And on all two of those, I would say yes. One of the first question I would like to answer is whether this is reasonable or necessary. And I ask, Mr. President, that you bear with me because I'm trying to expand a document that is online. What I did is that I went online and literally booked flights across the Caribbean from different destinations. And when the fee came up, so did all of the service charges for all of the different islands. This is what we have found. While one of my colleagues spoke about Antigua's departure tax, which is absolutely true, I totally agree. What is missing is the fact that there's the airport development tax, there's the airport service charge, there's the service surcharge, there is the ticket tax, there is the fuel surcharge. And when we added all of those together for Antigua, we came to about 86.65 US that would have been on these. Additionally, as we went across and we went to Grenada, we would have had from Grenada the airport administration fee, they would have had an airport service charge, they would have had a passenger service charge, they would have had a security surcharge, a fuel surcharge, a bag screen fee, and what is called an ACI charge as well. And coming out of that was about $64.18. And rather than take the US, that's all US. Rather than take this Honorable Chamber through all the others, and we would have done Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominican Republic as well. When we look at Barbados, even if we took it within the Caribbean, using the current fees we have, plus the $70 that would now be added as part of this service charge, Barbados came out at about $62.20 US. In addition, we looked at places like Australia, the UK, Russia, Bahamas, Germany. What we are seeing from all of these is that Barbados, in terms of the quantum of fees, we are not outside of the trend. We are not far out. To us, it sounds like a lot, but we are, in truth, not outside of the trend, and this is based on information picked up as recently as yesterday and the day before in actually booking flights. My senator is telling me talk about Jamaica. Jamaica, based on this, again, Mr. President, please bear with me as I pull this data out. Jamaica is departure tax approximately $35. The AIF is $5. The TEF is $20. $22.54 is the airport service charge. In total, I'm looking to see if we had done it comes to $113.94 US. Then we talk about St. Lucia. It is the airport departure tax of $35,000. Then there is the airport service charge of $25. There's a passenger service charge of about $15. Then there's $4.82 for security fees. There is then a security surcharge. There is then a ticket tax. So the point I am making is that when we look at real examples based on flights we literally booked and we pulled up the price for them and we looked at the charges, Barbados really and truly is not too far out. And therefore, in answering one of the questions I asked was, is this a reasonable fee relative to what our neighbors are doing? And I have not yet told you what Russia is doing, what Germany is doing, what the US or the UK is doing. All of those fees are higher than that of Barbados in this circumstance. So one, my question, is it reasonable relative to others? The answer to that is yes. And the question is it a necessary fee at this time? At the time when the Prime Minister would have presented the financial statement and budgetary proposals, the Prime Minister at the time said that the revenue gained from this measure would be $95 million, and $75 million going to the Barbados Tourism Marketing, Inc. and Barbados, and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority, and the remaining $20 million to central government. Now, at a time when this country is cash-strapped, and it is debt deep, and we need to find the resources to invest in areas that can generate growth, we definitely need to look to these kinds of measures until we can, in fact, create the level of economic restructuring that was referred to by Senator Drake. In the interim, we will have to go to measures like these to help us to raise the money to invest in our infrastructure, to invest in our experience here in Barbados, and to invest basically in what we will need to ensure that we put Barbados on a good footing for the future. Now, one of the things I would also like to share is the fact that, and I am finding my notes because I would not wish to mislead this House, but basically in the last, just 24 months ago, and if you would permit me, Mr. President, to simply make sure that I have it accurate, Jamaica increased its travel tax by about 75%. Approximately 16 months ago, St. Lucia would have reinstated its airport development tax and would have also raised its fees. Further afield, 4 months ago, the UK increased its charges, which they call an air passenger duty for long-haul flights, to $99 US. Now, based on, and again, I need to make sure that I have the accurate notes here, based on Travel Weekly, after Jamaica would have raised their fees, and after St. Lucia did that, the following year, both countries recorded an increase in the number of passengers going in. So while I understand the fare, it makes sense to have the fare that if you raise fees and you have a price-sensitive clientele, that then it will affect them. What we have seen with both of our neighbors in less than 24 months ago is that, in fact, that has not borne out to be true. I would suggest, therefore, to this Honourable House that we consider allowing this charge to go forward and then doing our own studies, doing our own research to determine the actual impact on Barbados, and at that point, from an informed perspective, rather than our own anxieties or our own fears, which are all understandable, then we make meaningful decisions about where we go to next. So we say the questions I asked was, one, was it necessary and was it reasonable? And the next question I asked myself is, why now? Why not a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now? It says a one-word answer: competition. Competition. Our competitors, as you would have heard from other senators, have already started to invest using some of the resources that they garnered from these very same kinds of measures. You would also have heard an earlier senator say, I believe it might have been Senator Drake's, I speak on the correction, Mr. President, that we are already beginning to fall behind. The statistics are telling us that not only are we falling behind in terms of some arrivals of clients, but of tourists, but when we do get the numbers that we would be happy with, they are not spending enough in Barbados because the experience in Barbados is not attracting them to be able to spend more money. Again, there is a need for us to invest and to find ways to fund not just the product, but the experience of Barbados and other infrastructural needs. And so, Mr. President, I will make my intervention short. If you ask me, is it necessary, I would say yes, based on the current circumstances of Barbados and what we need to do to put ourselves on a footing for the future. If you ask me, is this surcharge reasonable, I say yes, based on actual research that we have done on the ground. And if you ask me why now, it is simply because we cannot afford not to do it now. With that, I am obliged to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McConney. I see next on my list, Senator Tate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have listened to my colleagues. I am not going to get into the merits of the levy. We have been told that it is necessary. I do not know where to look to confirm if it is or not, but right now, based on the cares of the country, levy coming. My task this evening, as I tend to seem to be doing, is to highlight components of the legislation which, to my mind, affect the efficiency of the total piece of legislation, Mr. President. The proposed amendments with respect to this airport service charge amendment bill seek to amend the Parent Act, which is Chapter 59 of the Laws of Barbados. Now, Mr. President, apart from the fact that the point raised by Mr. Franklin, I really didn't understand what he meant by the wrong act. But Senator Franklin has this tendency to start making points and not necessarily finish, so you're sometimes left in abeyance. But the point he made about the collection of the levy and who collects and who will pay any claims for exemption, I believe was valid. And I'm going to develop that point and maybe revert back to what I just said. Mr. President, the proposed amendment seeks to amend Section 3, subsection 1 of the Principal Act, where the $70 and the $140 that will be imposed on persons and no longer travelers is identified in subsection 1, the new subsection 1, which is fair enough, $25 out, $70 and $140 in. But as I look at the Principal Act holistically, Mr. President, because I am one who firmly believes that you cannot look at amendments without looking at the Principal Act to understand what the proposed amendments are and to see how they impact the Principal Act. Looking at subsection 2 of section 3, bearing in mind that the proposed bill seeks, in the arrangement of its sections, to amend section 3. Section 3, subsection 2 speaks to basically exemptions. And Mr. President, if you would bear with me, please, I believe that there are components of subsection 2 that need to be addressed so that the amendments to this piece of legislation can be done holistically instead of redoing this piecemeal amendment process. Where we have, today we're dealing with the levy, but we're only gonna deal with subsection 1 of section 3, where, however, there is room for further amendment in the rest of section 3. Because piecemeal means that when you're gonna be dealing with any legislation coming out of these houses of parliament, we're gonna have to be walking around with 6 and 7 pieces of subsidiary legislation to know what the law is. And I believe that if we are amending and we have the opportunity to amend a particular section, and as we review, we find that there are other parts of the legislation that could be amended, whether or not you're dealing with the levy, use the opportunity to amend one time so you have one amendment. If not, you're gonna find yourself, as I have been informed has happened, where you are on your feet in a court, making a submission on a point of law, and in the middle of it, somebody's gonna say to you, that has been amended, you know. You can apply your whole case on the wrong piece of legislation. And while I understand that the amendments are published in the official gazette, only certain people pay attention to the official gazette, Mr. President, realistically. Amendments, unless they are sensational, like the NSRL and the tax clearance, are not ordinarily advertised in the regular places of advertisement. So it is entirely possible for an amendment to take place that can impact you and you do not know it has happened. And I do not think it lends to efficiency to have to be dealing with anything to do with the law and you have to have 5 and 6 pieces of paper because people did not take the time to amend holistically. Having said that, Mr. President, I invite those of you who have access to Chapter 59 and in particular subsection 2, which reads, inter alia, among other things, the airport service charge shall not be payable by A, the Governor General, his wife or children under the age of 18 years. Let me stop there. Based on the ages of the Governors General that have been appointed to Barbados over the last however long, it is unlikely that any of those persons will have a child at the age of 18. Pardon me? Well, but it's all over with you. They may have grandchildren at that age, but it's unlikely they're gonna have children under the age of 18. I am of the view that this subsection should be amended to put a full stop by children. Under the age of 18 years for our Governors General is not realistic. Take it out and put the Governor General, her husband or children, because I know this is his wife thing. I understand it means the same thing. I just felt like saying her husband or children. And put a full stop. Under the age of 18 years means that as this stands right now with the current Governor General, if she travels with her child, he will pay the levy because he's over the age of 18. That is, to my mind, patently flawed because I believe that he is given certain privileges to travel because he is the child of the Governor General as it relates to the type of passport that he has. And if the children of ministers and senators are being exempt, I believe that the child of the Governor General should also be exempt. I move on. We have at subsection C, the wives, husbands, or children, I beg your pardon, let me go to subsection B. The airport service charge shall not be payable by B, members of the House of Assembly or the Senate. So, Senator Springer, you do not have to worry. Your dislike of paying taxes in this regard, done. You don't have to worry about it because you don't have this to pay, according to the legislation. You've gone clear. Subsection C says, the wives, husbands, or children under the age of 18 years of members of the House of Assembly or Senate when traveling with such members. Now, I do not have any children, nor do I have a husband. Your business. However, it seems to me that based on the current makeup of the various houses of Parliament, Mr. President, that there are more persons within the two houses that have children over the age of 18, and you're gonna thank me again, and who will not travel with their parent who is a member of the House or the Senate. Which 18-year-old, which child is going to travel with their parent now? No. I'm saying, with respect to this section, take out under the age of 18 and just put children. You are discriminating against the children who are over the age of 18, who are your children, and you are exempt. That's the word, ageism? The children that are your children who are over the age of 18, a number of them are going to be traversing backward and forward to school overseas. So chances are they're not going to be with you when they're traveling to and from school. And they're not going to want to travel with you anyway. So I find this section particularly limiting because it limits the age of the child, and it only kicks in if you are under the age of 18, if you are traveling with the members. Meanwhile, interestingly enough, subsection I allows children under the age of 12 to be exempt. So, full stop. They don't have to be traveling with the parent. They're just exempt. I'm saying, if we're doing the legislation and we're getting with the times, fix the legislation. Both houses have children over the age of 18. Both houses have persons who are serving. If it is that the exemption is to be allowed to stay because it has not been addressed in the amendment, take off the age limit for the children of the members of the houses, take off when traveling, make it make sense. If not, you could find yourself with your 18-plus child paying a levy and you are not paying the levy. And to me, that there's something wrong with that. So that's how I see the changes need to take place as it relates to subsection 2 vis-a-vis the Governor General and the wives, husbands, or children of the members of the House of Assembly or the Senate. I have not come up with the age or the exemption. It's already encapsulated in Chapter 59, and therefore all I'm requesting or suggesting is that it be fine-tuned. Now, when it comes to the exemption, though, the practical application of the exemption, I'd like someone to explain it to me, because we are all exempt according to the legislation, but nobody can explain to me how you're going to benefit from the exemption, particularly if you buy your ticket online. So unless we're going to be provided with codes like how we're provided with diplomatic passports, how are we going to attain the exemption? And if it is that you're going to get a refund, because as I understand it from Grant, the collector of this tax or this levy is IATA. IATA will pay to the Grantley Adams International after it deducts its 2.5%. If we want to go and claim our exemption because for whatever reason we've paid it and we've not gone into a travel agent, and even if we go into a travel agent, I don't know if they have the power not to charge it. We're supposed to be going to the Accountant General for a refund, but we have not paid anything to the Accountant General. We have paid the money at Ticket. Ticket is IATA. IATA deducts 2.5%, pays it to Grantley Adams International Airport. I'm not understanding the nexus between Grantley Adams as the collector and IATA as the payee, the payor, and the Accountant General as a refunder, Mr. President. There seems to be something a little confused about that, and I would like there to be clarity, because if it is that this legislation makes provision for exemption, you should have the right to use the exemption. Now, Section 8(1) makes provision for refunds. Any person, of the Principal Act, makes provision for funds. Any person who proves to the satisfaction of a collector that he has paid on account of the airport service charge an amount in excess of the amount which he is properly required to pay pursuant to this act shall be entitled to have the amount so paid in excess refunded, and the Accountant General is hereby authorized to make the refund accordingly. Subsection 2 of Section 8 says, no claim for a refund under this section shall be entertained after the expiration of 6 months from the date on which payment of the amount in dispute was made. Mr. President, my position is that Section 8 makes provision for disputes of payment of the levy. But as a member of the House of the Senate and a member of the House of Assembly, our exemption is not supposed to be the subject of a dispute. And we ought not to have to go this route to be refunded that which we are entitled to be exempted from. There are certain things that certain people are not supposed to have to engage in by virtue of the position they hold and the job that they do. If the persons who are politically minded don't want to say it, I don't have a problem with saying it. We are not supposed to have to, every time we travel, go and beg for an exemption, Mr. President. We're not supposed to pay it. So my concern is, as we seek to amend, is it that Section 3, subsection 2 was supposed to be reviewed? Is it that it's supposed to be in place? Well, based on the proposed bill, it is supposed to remain in place. But it is not being practically applied. And therefore, my submission is if we are doing things, improving, fixing, enhancing, Mr. President, things need to be done properly. We have a piece of legislation where when we were in discussion, everybody said, well, we just gotta pay it though. That's just the way it is. No, because the legislation that I have read and my understanding says I'm not supposed to pay. So unless you're gonna provide me with a code now that I have been elevated to a senator that allows me to key it in when I'm booking a flight, then there's a problem, because the government, if they pay for everybody to go on a trip for something that we need, how are they to recover it? It is a practical application. It's the practical application, and somebody needs to work it out because it's in the legislation. And I challenge anyone to tell me that you are to apply for it. That is not something we ought to have to do. That is not something that the Governor General's representative who's booking her flight is supposed to have to engage in. That is not something that a minister of government or a senator should have to be engaged in. You are a senator, you're exempt. You have a child, exempt. You have a husband, exempt. End of story. We're not supposed to have to do that. So I encourage the powers that be to mind their business, because this impacts, you're not going to want to deal with it because you're getting an exemption. Oh my goodness, you're getting an exemption. You are not paying the tax, you're going to lose votes. No. No. Handle your business. You are government. You have allocated through your drafting and your passing of this legislation an exemption. Handle it. Fix it. Make it practical. That's what I have to say. In relation to section 3, if you're amending, amend, and if it exists and there is an exemption, make it practical, Mr. President. As it relates to section Section 5 of the duty of carrier, that is the proposed amendment. You know what, Mr. President, in that regard, I will leave that to committee. That particular amendment, I will leave that to committee. That's fine. So, Mr. President, my submissions are that with respect to section 3, subsection 2, we need to look at the limit of 18 years, the limit when traveling with such members as I alluded to earlier, and generally speaking with respect to these exemptions, that someone takes the time to take it beyond the words of the legislation and make it practical. And stop avoiding things because, I don't know, it's uncomfortable. It's already there. You have the right. Exercise the right, make it practical, and stop tiptoeing around things that you are entitled to receive. With those words, Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much. Senator Grant?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think, first of all, sir, it should be pointed out that sir, that there would have been extensive discussion in relation to the measures which need to be adopted in order to ensure that we put Barbados on a sustainable growth path. I want, sir, to reflect on what the leader of government business indicated when he first introduced this bill, that this bill is to facilitate the realization of 95 million Barbados dollars in a full fiscal year, Of that, $75 million is to be utilized by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and Barbados Tourism Product Authority, which now is guided and managed by a common board. And the other $20 million is to be utilized for tourism, civil aviation, and the shareholder commitments of Barbados to LEAT. And I reference that, first of all, Mr. Deputy President, because I think that we have to keep focus on the objective that is provided through this amendment that appears in this bill. Sir, it is very important that we are aware of the fact that Barbados as a tourism destination is not simply competing with St. Lucia or Grenada or Antigua. We are in fact competing with the entire world. We are competing with destinations across the globe. And I want, sir, to first endorse what Senator McConney has said. I have here, sir, the Caribbean Airport passenger fees in US dollars. And what Senator Reverend Maxwell referenced, from what I have observed, relates to the international transfer fee and not to the full range of fees that are being charged by tourism destinations in the region. And I support the fact that Barbados, even with this increase in terms of the introduction of this airport service charge, is not at a ridiculous high amount. Of course, sir, persons are always concerned that increase in taxation and increased prices can impact cost competitiveness. But I want to make this point, that competitiveness cannot only be measured and must not only be measured by cost. Mr. Deputy President, you know, in this chamber, we've talked on a couple of occasions about the challenges with the South Coast sewage plant. The leader of government business, as he introduced this bill, talked about the Barbados brand. What is the Barbados brand? What does the Barbados brand stand for? And what is the image that visitors have when they hear the word Barbados? Of course, Mr. President, we would like to think that the visitors coming to Barbados observe Barbados as a safe, secure tourism destination which provides value for money, where the visitor experience is exceptional. But, sir, the past challenges, the challenges over the last 2 years prior to May 24th, sir, on the South Coast with the South Coast sewage plant, does not provide the positive image of a destination. Mr. President, sir, the inability to properly deal with garbage collection, only having 15 trucks when 42 trucks are required over the last 5 years, and where no action has been taken to facilitate more trucks. That, sir, has an impact on the image of the destination. Sir, it is not simply about cost. It is also about ensuring that the infrastructure which we have, that infrastructure is properly enhanced. Many of our visitors, Mr. President, have complained about the road network. And those elements have to be improved if we are going to ensure that the overall visitor experience is exceptional. And sir, when we speak about Barbados as a tourism destination, one of the objectives we want to achieve is ensuring that when persons come to our destination, that the experience which they have is exceptional and is one that will encourage them to come back, but also encourage them to tell their friends about Barbados and encourage their friends to come as well. So, sir, I want to start first of all by reflecting on the image of Barbados as a destination and the need for the funding to the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority. In the past, the main entity for providing destination marketing and destination management was one entity known as the Barbados Tourism Authority. A decision was taken to create two organizations, the BTMI and the BTPA. The BTMI focused on the marketing of Barbados as a destination, the BTPA focusing on product development. From what I observed, sir, those two entities were not functioning in the manner that was in the best interest of Barbados as a tourism destination. The BTMI and the BTPA represent two sides of the same coin. The truth is, Mr. President, that if you go into the major source markets and you are able to engage in the most effective promotion, you are able to entice prospective visitors to come to Barbados, you have to ensure that the product which you are offering is of a standard and of a quality that our visitors will be able to enjoy. And therefore, the BTMI and the BTPA represent two sides of the same coin. So, destination marketing requires that there's an entity every single day going into the marketplace, essentially engaging in promotions, engaging in trade shows, meeting with all of the tour operators, meeting with the different partners, the airlines, to facilitate persons coming to Barbados. And that is important. And while the estimates of revenue and expenditure would indicate that the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. would have in the past been allocated some $90 million, I believe, sir. The reality is that the money which the BTMI got in hand was not $90 million. The other thing that we also have to be very cognizant about, sir, is the fact that if you are not in the marketplace engaging in the marketing and promotion that is necessary, then you will not see the numbers coming. And I reflect, sir, on 2012, I believe, when the BTMI would have been allocated or given for that financial year $59 million US. The BTMI, in terms of its marketing, went what we term as dark in the marketplace. There was little activity that was being undertaken. There was little engagement that was happening with the major partners, the tour operators, the travel agents, with the airlines. And what we saw was a reflection in the numbers and a reflection in the spend. I also, sir, want to make this point, that while it is important to look at the number of visitors who come to our destination, there are other factors too that we must look at. The leader of government business would have indicated in his introduction that the level of revenue being achieved is similar to that of 2007, even though we have more visitors coming to Barbados. That clearly indicates that the type of visitor coming may be changing, but it also should cause us to reflect on the strategies which we are employing. Mr. President, there has been significant airlift coming out of the United States, increasing airlift coming out of the United States. And that has resulted in increasing number of visitors coming out of the U.S. market. But it is important for the destination marketing entity to also be looking to ensure that the number of seats that we have tie in and match with the number and the type of rooms which we have. And I reference that, sir, because the work that has to be undertaken by the BTMI, BTPA is not simply a matter of just going into the market. It is scientific. It is work where the operators in those entities, particularly in the BTMI as it relates to the marketing, have to look and to see what are the factors impacting on the visitors coming to our destination, and have to, in a very strategic way, design the programs and the strategies to be able to do that. I want to say, sir, because there have been comments made about the level of the airport service charge, and not so long ago, we would have amended a piece of legislation to facilitate the accommodation levies. And I think reference was made by Senator Boyce to the fact that government is also going to be increasing the VAT. Let me make this point, sir, that with the proposed increase in the VAT on the 1st of January 2020, the room levies that have been introduced will be discontinued. So that what is happening is that you are not going to see a greater level of burden put on the industry, but in truth and in fact, there's going to be a removal of the levy amounts. Mr. President, sir, Senator Franklin indicated that this legislation is the wrong piece of legislation. I, sir, don't agree with that at all. I believe that given the situation which the country faces, and given the determination on the part of the government.
Point of order, sir.
What is the point of order, sir?
He's misleading, or rather, sir, should it be a point of explanation, because I never said that. I said it's in the wrong, they're amending the wrong act. It should be a separate piece of legislation. This act does not accommodate this legislation properly. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I don't want the government raising money. I'm saying they put it in the wrong place.
Very well. One take it.
Mr. President, sir, I don't want to misrepresent what Senator Franklin said. I thought I heard him say that we have identified the wrong piece of legislation. I thought that is what I heard Senator Franklin say. And I interpreted that, sir, to suggest that the airport service charge has been put the wrong place. And I am saying to this chamber, sir, that I do not agree, because I believe that it is properly placed, given the fact that government has determined that there has to be a different type of funding for the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority, which are critical entities for the development of our tourism industry. Sir, you know, the money has to come from somewhere. We all know that we are in a very challenging financial time. But the one thing we cannot do, and the reason, sir, I refer to 2012, is to give an indication that if we are not engaging in the marketing actions in the markets that our visitors are coming from, in order to be encouraging visitors to come to our destination, then we will not see the growth in the industry. We need money, sir, to be able to engage in these critical actions that have to be performed by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority. Where will that money come from? And the government, sir, has made a determination to facilitate that money through this amendment that would provide $70 with respect to those traveling within CARICOM and $140 for those traveling outside of CARICOM. But sir, let me also make this point. The development of tourism does not only relate to sun, sea, and sand. There are some critical success factors that have to be in place in order to ensure that the tourism industry is successful. Airlift is very important. If a destination such as Barbados does not have airlift, if we don't have airplanes coming here, then we don't have a tourism industry. The chairman of LIAT wrote a book in relation to air transportation, very informative, where he speaks to the need for destinations such as ours to have adequate airlift. And airlift, sir, is facilitated where? At the international airport, the Adams International Airport. And therefore, we have to ensure that the experience at the airport is also exceptional. And I say experience, not identifying just visitors, the experience for Barbadians as well. And I know, sir, that the Minister of Tourism has indicated that the Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc. must examine the manner in which the flow of passengers occurs at the airport, and that the GAIA Inc. board must ensure that the experience coming through the airport is significantly enhanced. Sir, another critical success factor relates to accommodation. And you know, sir, maybe I should speak a little bit more about the airport. I should speak a little bit more about the airport before I get to the accommodation. Sir, how much time do I have? Another 20 minutes, sir? About another 20 minutes or so, sir?
That's about
Sir, let me just make this point. You heard me speak about the marketing and the promotion and the engagement of activities in the source markets. When a visitor comes to the Grantley Adams International Airport, that represents a moment of truth. We go into the source markets and we say that Barbados is a wonderful place to experience. We talk about all of the first world amenities that we have. We talk about what it means to be in Barbados. And when the visitor comes to the Grantley Adams International Airport, we have to ensure that the experience that they have is exceptional, because the moment of truth really reflects what has been facilitated in the marketing. So, Mr. President, there has to be, with respect to enhancing the visitor experience and with respect to enhancing the experience through the airport, a shared vision by all of the entities that operate at the Grantley Adams International Airport, so that you have immigration, you have customs, you have facilitation officers, you have red caps. Everyone has to understand the role in ensuring that that experience coming through the airport is exceptional, because we want to facilitate those persons who are coming in such a manner that they are extremely happy with Barbados as a destination. The reference was made to the kiosks. The kiosks, my understanding, Mr. President, they are presently being checked. They're working at this stage. They're being utilized. But, you know, sir, the length of time going through the airport is also something that we have to be very cognizant and aware of. Barbados is part of ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. There are certain standards that are put in place. We have to ensure that we not only meet those standards, but that we surpass those standards. So that is very critical and very important. I'm just going to speak very briefly to the other critical success factors, because I know that I'm being told that there is a limit in terms of the time. Accommodation. We have a number of boutique hotels. We have a number of brand hotels. And I think, sir, that the mixture is good. And I referenced the brand and the boutique, and I'm going to speak very briefly to the attractions and the activities which we have, because, sir, those elements are able to relate to the visitors exactly what Barbados has to offer. Sir, we have visitors who want to experience the authenticity of the destination. They don't want, sir, to go to some place where things are imaginary, where they've been created and where they are not real. That is why you have visitors who are staying on the West Coast, paying, sir, some people $1,500 US a night. On Friday nights, they either get in a taxi or get in a bus, and they go to Oistins, and they enjoy Oistins. You know why? Because Oistins is real. Oistins is authentic. And as we seek to facilitate the expansion of this industry, we have to do it in such a way that we capture in our attractions and capture in our activities those elements that represent Barbados and those elements that convey to visitors what it means to be Barbadian. Sir, I think that this legislation is important. And another critical success factor relates, sir, to legislation. Because you need your airlift, you need your accommodation, you need your attraction and activities, but you also need the legislative framework to facilitate the growth of the industry. We do have, sir, some legislation, the Tourism Development Act, which facilitates investment in the industry. We have the Tourism Development Amendment Act, which facilitates the waiver of duties and taxes with respect to supplies. We have to ensure, sir, that those pieces of legislation are working appropriately and that they're able to provide the benefits to the tourism enterprises that require them. And let me make this point, sir. It is not about concessions. It is really about competitiveness. The point has to be made, again, that persons visiting Barbados have numerous destinations that they can go to. And if we are going to be competitive, then we have to be able to offer good value for money to the visitors who come to this destination. Sir, this piece of legislation facilitates, this amendment facilitates monies that will be used by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority to engage in critical actions, measures relating to destination marketing, measures related to destination management. It also is very important that while these entities continue to collaborate and function now under a common board, and while the government determines what the public-private sector partnership will look like, it is also very important that we ensure that our infrastructure is enhanced and that the product offering which we have for visitors is enhanced as well. Therefore, sir, the question is, where does the money come from? And the government, sir, has identified a mechanism for facilitating this much needed revenue. $75 million to go to the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority. Mr. President, sir, I think that it is important that we give our support to this piece of legislation. There are, sir, concerns that have been raised about differential charges. But, you know, sir, there are differential charges now existing in the fees, because there is an aspect of the fees which relates to international transfers, and there's an aspect of the fees which relates to domestic, which relate to regional transfers. So if sir, if I could just refer to the Caribbean airport passenger fees, and just pick a couple of countries. Grenada, for example, there's an international transfer fee of $29.64 US. In Sir St. Kitts and Nevis, it's $17 US for the international transfer fee. In St. Lucia, the international transfer fee is $15, while the regional transfer fee is $1. In St. Lucia, I said $15, sir, and $1. Sir, the point that I'm making is that there's already a disparity, a difference in the fees. What has happened, though, is that the reference that was made to the fees was made, sir, only take holistically, and in the case of Senator Maxwell, where he only referred to the international transfer fee component. But within the structure of the overall airport passenger fees in the region, the point has to be made that there are charges that are facilitated for regional transfers that is different to charges facilitated for international transfers. And so I say that because just to reflect on the principle, that principle is not something that is not known to this industry. So, sir, with those very few remarks, because, sir, I know that I have a little bit more time, but with those few remarks, sir, I want to give my support to this bill.
Thank you, Senator Grant, and I now call on Senator Greenidge to make his contribution.
I give you a solemn promise, sir, that I will not nearly be as long as Senator Grant. I first want to reflect on the 2 points made by Senator Tate when she spoke earlier in the debate, and where she had said that the amendment should just say the Governor General, for example, and the child on the full stop. And it did cross my mind at that time that we were having Governors General who were living to 80 years, 80-something years old, and they very well could have a child 60 years old, and that child would be exempt too. And I do believe that that is what the Act is trying to get around. And therefore, I wholeheartedly agree with leaving the amendment as it, leaving it as it is, rather than changing it to a child full stop. The second point which I would want to make in relation to perhaps the same head is that I believe that when you pay your money to the airline or to the travel agency, that the word, you should let them know that exempt means exempt. And if you, as a senator, someone under 12, member of the Defense Force or whatever, communicate this to them that you are exempt and let them exempt you at source rather than have to fight to get it back through some other strategy or other. The other thing is that she also made the point that we should take the opportunity to fine-tune the legislation. I do not believe that every time a piece of legislation comes to the Senate where we are seeking to amend Section 3, 1A, 1B, for instance, in this instance, that we should be looking at the other sections of that legislation, Sections 78, 79, and 80, and saying, let us amend these sections too, now that we have the opportunity. I do not think that that is necessary. If, for instance, if the Constitution came before the Senate and we were trying to have an amendment, I don't think that we are coming to amend one thing and then we look at the Constitution and see other sections and say, let us amend those too. So I am not at all...
Point of order, Mr. President. When I indicated that I felt that we should be looking at amendment holistically, I made the point that we were looking at Section 3 of the proposed legislation, and therefore, if there was anything within that legislation that warranted amendment, in fact, in my opinion, then it warranted being changed so that we're not saddled with different pieces of subsidiary legislation. That's what I said. I didn't say that we're supposed to look at the entire piece of legislation. In relation to this, I made a reference to Section 3 because we are amending subsection 1, and I noticed, because I looked at Section 3, that there were things about subsection 2 that could have done with amendment. Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm not going to get into the arguments with Senator Tate. Now, Mr. President, I have to say that I have learned a lot this evening from Senators McConney and Senator Grant, because I now realize that the governments the world over, not just in Barbados, have used, and they have used it quite well too, the whole idea of the airport service charge and other similar bits of legislation as a means to raise revenue for their tourism sector. And it tells me that the impression should not be given that Barbados is the first or the only jurisdiction in the Caribbean to introduce such an airport charge. And I'm glad that they went through almost island by island to indicate to this honorable chamber that there are others in the Caribbean who have done and who are doing the identical thing. They have already have a service charge, airport service charge in place, and in addition to that, they have increased, just like we are increasing, their service charge from time to time. The other thing I learned is that the fees, our fees that we are charging, in many cases, are below the fees charged by some others in the jurisdiction. But whatever we do in this country, and I have to say, they said it earlier today, there is going to be criticism from some parts. You know, the critics are going to say, and some have said, that we're going to make travel to and from Barbados more expensive. That point is going to be made. I don't even think that the critics need to tell us this, because we know that already. We know that we cannot make travel any more expensive. But we have to let the country know that our economy is in serious trouble and that we have to find ways and means to breathe new life into it. And that this increase in the service charge is one such measure. We have nothing to be ashamed about. I agree that it is becoming more expensive to travel generally. And in many cases, it might even be not only more expensive, it may even be more uncomfortable to travel generally. If we could only forget this service charge for a minute and look at the airlines and see that they too have contributed to the expense and the discomfort. So blame should not be leveled at the government and the airport, those charges alone. Because in the 1960s, for instance, regardless of where you were going on an airline, for an hour, you sat down for an hour. And believe it or not, in that hour you had a full meal. And you didn't have to pay a cent for it. But those days are gone. You didn't have to pay a cent extra. Those days are gone now. Nowadays they bring around a sandwich or something and tell you to buy it. And in spite of all that, you know that the airfares have skyrocketed. They have skyrocketed. Nowadays on an airline you may get a cup of hot coffee or tea or something, a glass of juice. And if you're lucky, they may even give you a cookie, something of the sort. And that is as much as you get for a 4-hour flight these days. Corn? Yeah, some, what do you call those, pretzels or something. Yeah. And yet the airports, yeah, the airfares are up. But we have no control over the airlines. They put up, you have to take it, or you don't travel. Now, I saw an article by Mr. Hugh Riley just a week or so ago, in which he was lamenting the fact that there was not, that the fares traveling between the islands in the Caribbean had become very expensive, and the prices were high. I believe that we are paying for interregional travel for the bad management of airlines, and passengers are asked to bear the brunt of the expense. And we have to encourage, as Mr. Riley said, more interregional, more Caribbean travel. And I agree with them wholeheartedly. But as I said, we have to do something about, well, the airlines. I wouldn't want to call the name of the ones who manage themselves very badly and then cause the passengers to bear the brunt of the expense. As I said, I learned a lot from Senator Grant. He said that you have to make the experience more memorable as possible, and as enjoyable as possible for the tourists who come to Barbados. It is our intention, of course, to make Barbados the #1 tourist destination in the region. And we have to do our best then to make the tourists want to come back to Barbados in spite of this airport service charge. So we have to double up and work a bit harder to make them come back. Our job is not to make them come to Barbados. I always say that our job is to make the tourists want to come back to Barbados. So as Senator Grant said, the BTMI and the BTPA, they will do their best to advertise Barbados, and there is no better advertisement, as he said, than for the tourist himself or herself to tell her fellow employees, to tell her friends and her family what a nice place Barbados is, and to make them want to come to Barbados. Now, are we doing enough, though, to make them want to come back? And I understand that this year at the Grand Kadooment, that the number of locals, that was down, and that the number of Beijing Yankees, that was down, and the number of visitors, that was down. And everybody seems to be saying that the reason it was down was because of the lawlessness that took place on the last Kadooment Day, when we had a lot of nonsense going on Spring Garden. And this year again, we had no shooting or anything, but I thought it was a horrible thing that we could have people throwing about headstones at Coral Ridge and doing all kinds of nonsense. This does not speak well for Barbados, the people who have come here to enjoy themselves and to see some of the nonsense which is happening. We have to, as Senator Grant said, we have to do the little things well. We have to do the little things well if we want them to come back. For example, the whole question of a clean Barbados. I remember a few weeks ago, Senator Sands, in this very chamber, said that there were some tourists who, on the WhatsApp, had said that they were not coming back to Barbados because of the nauseating effect that the experience that they had on the South Coast. These are things that we need to do. And we need to let them know that we are a friendly people, and especially those people who were in customs and immigration and the taxi men. Those are the first responders, the very first people that they meet to give a good impression of Barbados. And one of the things, I think it was Minister Simmons and Mr. Grant who mentioned it, that indeed little things like being prompt at the airport with the wheelchairs for those people who have a disability. I have seen someone, a disabled person, having to wait about 45 minutes before a chair was available for them. This is not a good thing. And if we want to make people want to come back, yes, at the airport itself, those first responders, the wheelchairs and so on, we have to be prompt and we have to be very, very businesslike. Now, the other thing is that we have to give them a hassle-free, show them that Barbados is a hassle-free place. About 4 weeks ago, on Broad Street, you have a tourist, there were 3 of them, 3 ladies, who got up, they were from a cruise ship. And they're walking on Broad Street, and they are on the right side of the road. And here is someone, one of those characters, who is up in their face and begging them and pulling at them. And they were literally scared. They walked over to the left side of the road, or virtually ran over. And he ran behind them. He is with them still. Still scared, they ran back to the right. And he is still behind them. Until, I think it might have been a taxi driver, it looked like, had to tell him not to do it, and had to speak to him in a very almost hostile way to stop him from harassing and hassling the tourists. We want people to come back. And with an experience like that, you wonder whether they would want to come back. Now, I think that we ourselves have to do a lot. We cannot be talking about flights coming out of Brazil and flights coming out of Panama and so on, and not a fella in the immigration or not a fella at customs speaking a word of Spanish, for instance. You know, nothing warms the visitor, the Spaniard, the person who speaks Spanish, like a little Buenos Dias, a little Como Estás. Not a fella speaks Spanish, not a fella. And people staying at our hotels, and not a fella in the hotel speaking Spanish. If you think about it, you can have somebody visiting Barbados for 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, the only people that they have to speak to will speak to each other, because no one speaks their language. And it would be a very boring vacation, and perhaps they may not want to come back. It is something which we have to think about. If we want to make ourselves the #1 destination, all these little things count. Now, as was said too by Senator McConney, the impression should not be given that potential visitors are going to spite Barbados because we have increased our service charges. We shouldn't give the impression that we have done something so wrong that we are going to run them away. There are countries, yes, who are vying for the same tourist visitor as we are. But those countries too have implemented their own service charge and they've increased their own service charge. So I do not think that we are going to lose any tourists because of this particular measure which we are putting in place. The tourists are not going to run and go to the Maldives and to the Seychelles and to Hawaii and Madagascar and all over the place. No, they're running into the same thing. So we may lose them though if we do not do the little things that I've spoken about, if we do not do them well. So as I said, I'm not going to be as long as Senator Grant, but I would want to give my full support to this bill, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Green, thank you.
Mr. President, not much is left for me to do in terms of wrapping up this debate. I thank all the honorable members for their contributions, and I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
Motion is that this bill be now read a second time. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
So, President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolves itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
It is being moved that I do now absent myself and the committee of the whole Senate further consider this matter. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. I know I absent myself, so.
What's this for?
The House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no.
Mr. Deputy President, I'm sorry. If clause 2 is numbered, but, oh, sorry, beg your pardon. If section 2, if clause 2 is beginning at number 2, is that what
You are
clause
Clause
2
2
is?
now. You are Clause 2 now.
Right, that is section 2?
Yes.
Okay. May I suggest, Mr. Deputy President, that with respect to paragraph A of clause 2, deleting the definition of the word, and then you have airport service charge, you would need to take off the word, the word, and just put deleting the definition of airport service charge. Because airport service charge is not a word. So I would suggest that we delete the words, the word. And with respect to section B, Well, the thing is, the principal act, Mr. Deputy President, refers to airport service charge with a capital A. This one here has a common A. I don't know if we make the amendment here, how it's gonna impact the principal act. Because there are parts of the principal act that refer to airport service charge with a capital A. However, I move on to community, the definition of community, and I'm suggesting that at the last line of the definition, that a comma be inserted after Bahamas, in as much as there's a comma by Nassau, to complete the grammatical makeup of that section. Thank you, Mr. Deputy President.
The proposed amendments are noted. So clause 2 as amended would stand bar?
Once they have second, once they've second.
Second, somebody needs a second.
I second the proposed amendment.
Yeah. Chairman, I'd like to move that clause 2 as amended stand bar.
The question is that clause 2 as amended stand bar. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
She's saying that she needs to look at
Okay.
No, he was saying that the drafters use the word interchangeably for one word or two words.
I'm just saying that there is an actual definition of airport service charge, so you could delete the definition of airport service charge rather than border airport service.
No.
There is a definition in the principal act.
Right, but
And they're inserting.
they just put a comma here at Bahamas.
No. If you're deleting a definition, right? So what you're doing is deleting one definition and replacing it with something definition. So you can't say
The words airport service charge. All you want is the S there.
wait.
All you want is the S there.
Is that why you can see it?
you want the words, all you want is the S.
The part of the words is the words.
It's a change that can be made.
If there's no words.
Use words.
If there's no words, I put words.
Yeah. Yeah. Leave it. No, man, you should put the S on. Put the S. Put the S. Put the S. So it does agree? Does agree. Yeah. No, we're amending, but in order to make it the amendment as simple as possible, what is being proposed is that definition of the words, we're simply adding an S on to word, of the words airport service charge. And the word traveler, yes. Yeah. So you gonna put that in the house again? Huh?
We got 3 now? Clause 3 then, yeah.
Clause 3?
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
The C?
Clause 4.
No, they ain't making
Oh, she's making it.
it. You know, you pass.
Even though we've passed section, we know this section, what, C?
Well, 2C should have had the same change
3C?
as you did in 2A.
The words.
Or the words immigration officer. We'll note that and amend that one as well.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 4 stand part.
Clause 4? The question is that clause 4 stand part. All honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 5 stand part.
The question is that clause 5 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 6 stand part.
The question is that clause 6 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. Senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. That's yours.
Chairman has reported to me the passes in committee of the bill under consideration.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The motion is that the bill under consideration be read a third time.
Third time.
All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Airport Service Charge Act, Cap 59. Amended Act. Amendment Act.
Motion under consideration is that this bill be now passed a third time and be so cited. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of our business today, and I beg to move that this session be adjourned until Wednesday, the 29th of August at 11 a.m.
The motion is that the Senate be now I'm here whispers that we should now go into vacation and resume on August the 29th at 11 a.m. All those in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 29th of August at 11 a.m. That has nothing to do with committee meetings.
Tell them I ain't no coming.
Dinner will be served.